Welcome back, my dear crime lovers. This is a new episode of the history of the American Mafia. A crime series, the true story of the American Mafia, brought to podcast by Fabiano and translated and read by me, Grace Carlisi. I do hope you enjoy this new episode. So, who were the Big Seven group? The bloodletting that accompanied the onset of Prohibition has never been accurately measured, but it was inevitable. When suddenly the prospect of an enormous profit was dangled before basically not too well-to-do criminals. At the end of World War I, there weren't that all many opportunities available for organised criminals. The political bosses did use them to control elections, but unfortunately, elections didn't come around every month. In the old days, the political bosses accepted the responsibility of seeing after their criminal cohorts in slow periods, putting them to work as bouncers, as shills for gambling joints and whorehouses, and so on. However, this too was changing as reformers, blue bloods, businessmen, the middle class, leaders of various ethnic groups were demanding a clean-up. In more and more parts of the country, political leaders could not operate in such blatant style anymore. They had no more use for the criminals and no reason to support them. The Volstead Act of 1919 dramatically altered everything. For criminals, there was a new opportunity for making millions of dollars. Gangsters slaughtered old bodies to take over bootlegging rackets, and explosions of gunshots and bombs filled the air of almost every American community of almost every size. Yet, with exceptions here and there, by the late 1920s, peace had settled on the bootleg world. It came through the Big Seven group. Forward-thinking gangsters had decided all the warfare was interfering with making money. There had to be peace in obtaining liquor, and there had to be an end to gangs hijacking each other's supplies. The answer lay in some sort of organisation that could constitute a central liquor buying office to handle all orders for booze and give everyone a fair share. This system would reduce the deadly competition for supplies and the inordinate protection costs for shipments. This would leave the individual bootleg gangs with more than ample time and resources to take care of any freelance hijackers who might be foolish enough to continue to carry out raids. Who deserves credit for originating the idea is difficult to tell, but it was probably either Arnold Rothstein, often called the Brain, or Johnny Torrio, also called the Brain. Certainly, both of them and Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano were all boasting about the idea by 1927. The organisation known as the Big Seven Group, since it was originally composed of 7 separate power groups, including Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello from Manhattan, Joe Adonis from Brooklyn and parts of Manhattan, Longley Zwillman from New Jersey and Long Island, Waxy Gordon and the rising Nick Rosen from Philadelphia, Nucky Johnson from Atlantic City, Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel from the Protection Enforcers, and Torrio, who came out of his Brooklyn retirement to offer organizational advice. When peace suddenly broke out in the Mid-Atlantic area as the Seven Group established its authority, other gangs around the country clamoured to join, among them those bossed by Mo Dalitz in Cleveland, King Solomon in Boston, and Danny Walsh in Providence. Even Al Capone was attracted, but the Chicago gang wars had gone on too long to be simply switched off by an appeal to reason. By the end of 1928, there were at least 22 gangs in the 7 group. By that time, Rothstein had been murdered, apparently not because of a gangland plot against him, but over a huge gambling debt that he had welshed onto professional gamblers. That didn't stop the momentum of the 7 group, and it led to the next logical step, solidifying nationwide criminal link. Mafioso, Italian, Jewish, Irish, Polish, or whatever. In 1929, the underworld held a vital conference at Atlantic City, where plans for new criminal enterprises and cooperation after the end of Prohibition were discussed. Had it not been for the success of the 7 group, such a conference would not have been held, and the confederation of the gangs around the country might never have come to fruition, nor created the National Crime Syndicate. The combined, or Big 7 group, was a criminal organization headed by organized crime figures on the East Coast during Prohibition, serving as the predecessor of the alleged National Crime Syndicate of the 1930s. The organization consisted of 7 Jewish, Italian and Irish American gangs on the East Coast. Following the reform movements and police crackdown on street gangs and other criminals, the criminal underworld entered a so-called slow period in the years during and after the First World War. While the older political bosses were able to get their former criminal associates work as bouncers and work in vice districts such as gambling dens and brothels, they began to disassociate themselves from their former criminal alliances. Following the announcement of the Volstead Act in 1919, many in the underworld readily entered into bootlegging as gang wars broke out in major cities across the country. As the struggle to gain dominance over the industry continued into the early 1920s, with shootouts and bombings, the group emerged to resolve the constant warfare, which was costing everyone a lot of money. Originally intended to serve as a centralized office for the purposes of ordering bootleg liquor to be equally distributed, the group would also reduce costs among bootleggers for supplies, and without worrying about rival bootleggers, enable independent bootleggers to focus on protecting their shipments from freelance hijackers. Although the concept of the organization differed between Arnold Rothstein and Johnny Torrio, both Charles Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky were major supporters by 1927. Its original members included Enoch Nucky Johnson, Abner Longlead Zielman of New Jersey, Mo Dalitz of Cleveland, Waxy Gordon and Harry Nigg Rosen from Philadelphia, Danny Walsh from Providence, and other representatives of gangs. Other members included the Bug and Mayor Mob as enforcers, and the semi-retired Johnny Torrio, who remained in an advisory capacity regarding organizational advice. As the violence of the bootleg wars died down in the mid-Atlantic area, others requested membership, including Dutch Schultz from Manhattan, Charles King Solomon from Boston. Al Capone also expressed interest in joining the organization. However, his gang war with the North Side Gang prevented him from doing so. Despite the death of Rothstein that same year and the subsequent pushing aside or deaths of the American and Irish American gang leaders, the remaining members of the 7 group were successful in establishing its authority and served as the basis for the Atlantic City Conference in 1929.